Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us again. I'm Diane from Kent District Library's Programming Department, and I'm so excited to be sharing with you this series of videos created by the Library of Michigan for the 2021 Michigan Notable Book Award winners. These author conversations introduce us to the incredible writing talent in our state and prompt those questions that you might ask if you were to meet those authors in person. We learn about how they got started, what inspires them, and those unique details about their award-winning book that will inspire you to read. Today's conversation is a great one with Tom Springer about his book, The Star in the Sycamore, Discovering Nature's Hidden Values in the Wild Nearby. I really hope you'll enjoy today's author conversation.
Hello, everyone. This is Tim Gleisner, Head of Collections at the Library of Michigan, talking today with author Tom Springer, winner of the 2021 Michigan Notable Book Award, The Star in the Sycamore, and also previous award winner in the book is called Looking for Hickories. And so again, here today with Tom Springer, the author of Star in the Sycamore. Tom, how are you today?
I'm great. It's a beautiful summer day here in Southwest Michigan.
Fantastic. Where are you about?
I'm in Three Rivers, so that's about 25 miles south of Kalamazoo. You know, we're in Michigan, so we always do this.
Yes.
You know, and it's definitely a sort of prairie oak opening country, and a lot of rivers and lakes where I'm at. So it's a nice place, nice mild-mannered Midwestern place to live.
Fantastic. So Tom, just going right into it, could you just share a little bit of your background and what, how did you become a writer?
I think, like a lot of writers, I first became a reader. And from age 6 or 7, I love books. Reading is something I picked up really easy. I had a mom who didn't ever go to college, but she loved to read to her kids. And she used to take us to the library every week. So that's why I'm still a huge supporter of libraries. I know what a powerful role they can play in the life of kids and families and communities. And that just, she was not afraid to give us books that were beyond our reading level. My brother and I are really interested in history and I in sports, and I would run out every day back when we had daily newspapers and pick up the day paper. We were living down in Melbourne, Florida, reading about the Tigers because we were emigres, right? It was 1968, and I remember getting up every morning and reading the newspaper. And then all of the books followed me into school. But unfortunately, what happened to me in school is I was really a lousy student. I got bad grades, and I would always want to do the readings, if we were assigned a reading, but I never got around to do the assignments or taking studies very seriously. So I graduated from high school with a 1.9 GPA, no plans of going to college. My dad is a barber. He told me to learn a trade, told me to learn to do something with my hands. So that my first failed attempts were in heating and air conditioning. I tried that till I was, 26 or 27 and realized that what I'd have to do with my hands was probably going to involve a keyboard rather than a acetylene torch or sheet metal tool. So I just sort of went back to university, and again wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I thought human resources or something, and I kept getting good grades in my writing classes, and finally it hit me. Well, maybe this is something I could do for a living. So I managed to focus on journalism, public relations as an entree into writing for a profession.
Sure. Okay. So now go into public relations journalism. But your books, now I've read both of them, wonderful books, very decidedly different. How would you describe your books?
Well, when you work in public relations journalism, you're sort of like a horse that's harnessed to the needs of the organization, right? Annual reports, speeches, books, news releases, videos. And I've worked for great organizations like the Kellogg Foundation and Borgess Medical Center and later Notre Dame. And the organizations were doing work that I believe in that makes it easy. At the same time, when you come home, a writer has to have a voice. And as you get into your 30s, at least for me, I wanted to have that voice about writing about my life, not what a 60-year-old, foundation president from the East Coast is a great guy, wanted to write about. So, and what really struck me in my studies was the power of the natural essay, especially I would say Aldo Leopold, and in the Sand County Almanac, of how it could combine that first person experience with factual information. And that was really powerful to me. And like a lot of things from your writer, you aspire to do something, you have to gradually work at it. But I like to have that duality in my life. In my organizational writing, was always third person. The I can't be in it. But in my home front, where my wife and I bought an old farmhouse to fix up when I was, in my late 30s, that becomes sort of the genesis and inspiration for the other type of writing I wanted to do. And the two really do complement each other. But I think, we embarked on this project to fix up this whole farmhouse and restore these 4 acres. Just a lot of great material there for, especially my first book, for writing about what the story of how that came to be and what it meant to us as people and how it connected us to community and the natural world around us.
Well, that's fantastic. So, I'm from Wisconsin originally, and Aldo Leopold, he's kind of a hero in the naturalist world. And so when did you read Sand County Almanac? What was, and how did you even come across that? Not everyone knows about that.
Well, my mother was always going to garage sales and bringing home books. And that was one. There was Civil Disobedience and Sand County Almanac, both these beat up sort of weather-stained, volumes that she brought home. And I started reading it. Right. And I would say in my mid-20s, I read it as a story, right? Because I liked the story of the environment. Later on, when I saw what he was really describing was this whole notion of ecology, which nobody had ever seen before, right? There's always that famous instance where he's, when he was working with the Forest Service in Arizona, he killed the wild wolf on the mountain because they were considered predators. It was this very, good, bad, view of the natural world. And he saw that dying flame in the wolf's eyes, and he saw that there's more at work here. This wolf had a role in this mountain, the ecosystems, every pieces all work together. Right. And as I progressed in my studies, I saw more of that. And I moved into reading about Wendell Berry and reading about, different views of conventional agriculture and what communities involved in terms of people in the rural America. And I think, it's through your reading you sort of grow, because I wasn't either of those things. I wasn't a scientist or a farmer, but I like sort of pursuing those themes in my own work.
Well, I think what's amazing about your work, I think what struck me with your first book, Looking for Hickories, and The Star and the Sycamore equally so, is how you find, you take the very common ordinary and make it, it's kind of trite to say, magical. Just the way you describe, nature down the road. That's how I've always described your books. Basically something that you drive by every day, things that you've heard about. It's because of your books I even discovered what a pawpaw fruit was. I think it was in your first book. But how do you stop? How do you stop and just go, yep, I'm going to write about this? Because to me, that's something I would just drive by and not even pay attention to. But you literally drill down. And I'm sorry if I'm getting too far ahead, but that's what I find amazing about your books.
Well, I think we're all born with a natural curiosity, especially children. When I was a kid, I was taken to the seashore a lot by my parents and just go play out there, and you get knocked over and the waves knock your swimming trunks down and you full of sand, you get back up. But I think it's about what I call the wild nearby. It's about paying attention. For one reason, Tim, I've lived here for 26 years, so I am sort of intentionally grounded myself. At a monastery, monks take what they call a vow of stability, where they're going to not leave the place and spend their time there. I haven't done that. I'm married and not a monk. But that notion is that that being present, and it is true. You can walk down the same road 25, 50, 100 times, and then you can see something different. It was there all along. Right. And I still try to do that, even though it's so easy to get in the ruts of our behaviors. And I think that is, this is such a peripatetic, I love that word, nation, where people don't stay and people do move and pick up and move. And we certainly moved a lot as a kids. I lived in a dozen houses. Right. And the natural world is so it's so resilient that it shows up in places you least expect it. And that's where I like to have these aha moments, is that just follow your curiosity. What is that tree? I've gone by it a million times. How can I learn more about that? And once you do, you get enthusiastic about that. And hopefully that carries into your writing.
So I got to ask about that. I mean, because, I'm a librarian archivist. How do you research it? I mean, like that's the thing that I find amazing. I mean, you're walking by that same tree. Do you just stop and say, what is that tree? And then you just go and dig into it more? Like, how do you research some of these essays?
I started with books, and Donald Colross Petey, who wrote these beautiful essays, The Natural History, his book, I don't have it here. I'd hold it up. It's about that thick. And he wrote it back in the 40s about Donald Colross Petey, Peattie. You just have to read these. It sounds a little floral, but he was an amazing scientist who really did what we call good, science communications, and able to write the stories of these trees and find out about them that way. So I kind of get to know them in a literary way. That was really helpful. It got me inspired to want to write about them as separate creatures. Then I go on the web and I go to reputable sources like Michigan State University or any place that has a good forestry program. I want to learn about the specifics of the trees, at least from a general scientific notion. But these trees always have a lore because, the pawpaw tree, the hickory tree, there's always some lore back to when they were an integral part of people's lives, whether the nuts for food or the pawpaws for food for the Native Americans. And so there's always that strong human connection. And then if you look forward, a lot of nurseries still sell these specialty trees. For instance, you can find from them, what people are doing with them now. So anyway, I start with Petey and some of the, and certainly, Thoreau has written about some of these species, but then you triangulate between your experience, the sort of literary explanations, and the scientific ones that explain, the tree's basic purpose and role and, habitat, that sort of thing.
Sure. So I got to ask, I mean, has nature writing, if I may call it that, or nature essays, has that always been your choice, or have there been other genres that you write, or is that the one that you probably gravitate towards the most?
In my personal writing, because I work for a big foundation, the Kellogg Foundation, they work in, health, agriculture, early childhood, racial equity, I got to travel to, Southern Africa and Latin America, human development. So I've got to write a lot about a lot of, wonderful themes. But when I'm on my own, this is the natural world, right? That's the thing that I'm most curious about. And I just find it to be an endlessly productive and enriching source of because you can't get to the bottom of it, right? You can't get to the bottom right about the natural world. There's always some new plant, some new wrinkle. And it's just like some people ask me, have you ever thought about writing a novel? I mean, I might as well try to write in Sanskrit. I just wouldn't. I like novels. I just wouldn't know how to do that. How do you start, create this whole world, all these characters, have them all work together? And I've certainly met enough interesting characters as a nonfiction writer that has satisfied my need to describe people who are a little bit off kilter.
Well, you talk about Sand County Almanac, and I'm going to take it that that's a major influence for you. But I mean, I think the difference is, and I'm speaking at a very personal level because I've read your books and Aldo Leopold's and Wendell Berry. I find yours to be much more accessible. I find yours to be, and I know I'm not supposed to interject a critique here, and I don't mean it in a bad way. I think it's fantastic because, quite frankly, sometimes I slog through Aldo Leopold and others. But I mean, describe that process to me. I mean, how much editing goes into your work, because you do make it very precise. You do make it very accessible for someone like
me. Well, first of all, I'm a layperson. I'm a generalist. I'm a mile wide and inch deep, some people might say. And I've spent my career working around academics, both in the foundation world and at Notre Dame. And I'm not burdened by a huge excess of knowledge, so I don't have that. And I don't mean that sarcastically. When you know so much, about some field of study, and you sat down to write it as a layperson, it's really difficult because you're hearing all these voices, where every sentence needs a citation, and you're saying, okay, if I write this in plain speak, will my colleagues and the people I admire in my other discipline think less of me because I'm trying to be too simple with it? And I don't have any of that. I just start with a love for creation and a interest in these creatures and try to write about them. And on the flip side, I'm trying to be accurate. I don't want to misrepresent any species. So whatever basic science I include in there, I really want to get that right because I don't want to lose that credibility.
Sure.
But the process, man, the process, and I think I got slower as I got older. And the process is just with a lot of rewriting. I'll rewrite an essay 30, 40 times, at some point, because every time I start writing, I go back through it again. And that's probably a bit sort of obsessive, and it's not always effective. And sometimes I'll say, wait a minute, that version I did 3 or 4 versions ago, that was actually better. But I think because of how I write, I try to make a big deal out of small things. The prose has just got to be right because it's the quality of the writing which I try to attain that is going to make it work. Because the subject matter, as you said, it can be pretty mundane. Okay, I planted this tree in my backyard and I waited 5 years for it to put on fruit, right? You've got to try to bring some life and experience and interest in it because, as my professor Eric Friedman at MSU used to say, journalism professor, the easiest thing for anyone to do is to quit reading, right? So, you can lose people if you feel it bogged down. And that's one more thing. A huge fan of reading my work out loud and always trying to get the pacing and the sort of tone in it. So, because if it doesn't read right verbally, then when people are reading it, they're going to get bogged down and pick up their smartphone or something and stray into something else,
Exactly. Well, I mean, I have this vision of you like walking the nearby woods or the nearby roads, down a gravel road with your notebook. I mean, do you always have a notebook in hand and you're like, yep, that's a good idea for another essay? Or,
I sometimes when I'm on assignment, I'll do that. For the most part, I feel it's really important to make your life a lived experience and to, because it's almost like when you're trying too hard, I think you end up forcing. So if I'm going to go up to, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to go up to Keweenaw Peninsula. We're going to stay at Eagle Harbor, beautiful little place in the lake. And I'm going to go out there and I'm just going to enjoy hiking and kayaking and looking for stones on the beach. And if I have my senses fully engaged and absorbed in that experiences, then when I come back, I can reflect on it and pick what's most meaningful. But I feel like if I'm there at the notebook, I mean, I could take some notes if I was on assignment, but it sort of interferes with your pure enjoyment of it, And I know on my honeymoon, we went out west to visit 3 or 4 states, and I wrote a series of 6 or 7 travel stories and for the local newspaper. And and all of a sudden I'm taking photos and my camera jams or something, and then I'm all in a bad mood for the day. And here I am on my honeymoon. So I heard about that. I'm like, so you kind of have to make that secondary. I mean, in some ways, I think it's a bit sad if your life is totally thinking about what you're going to write next, because you want to authentically live a life which gives you the good fodder for, powerful writing anyway.
Well, that's something funny. You mentioned your honeymoon. So the first time when I got a hold of you, you had said, my wife told me I better get the second book out because, I'm a slow writer and, basically it'll never come out. How long have you been writing these essays? I mean, like how long, and I, even going back to Looking for Hickories, which I think came out maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago. How long have you been doing these essays and writing and rewriting these essays?
No, it's embarrassing to say, man. There's 36 essays in the book, and it took about 18 months to really finish about a third of them. But some of them have been around for 15 years, and I, some of them are early experience with my children. I have one in there about going to a friend's house and learning how to bake bread.
Right.
And so these things are 10, 12 years old, and it's, but yet other ones, it takes that long to sort of get the perspective to write them, because when I came to all of them, I didn't feel the quality of writing is where it needed to be. I didn't feel they were fully developed. I didn't feel they were clear. And some of them have been published, Michigan Blue Magazine, it's a wonderful magazine. And that's in places like that, or Notre Dame Magazine, but the other ones were just there. And as you can see, I haven't worked at it nonstop. I mean, when I wrote a first book, I said I never planned to write a second book. But the essays sort of kept piling up, and I thought I really need to do this. And so, yeah, some of them are, 15, 10 years old. Other ones more recent.
Well, I think they stand the test of time. I mean, anybody who read this book in the committee, I can tell you, I mean, we all knew right from the beginning, like, this is a winner. Like, we knew that the quality of writing and just the subject matter and everything else, we're like, yep, this is a winner. We don't have to go any further with this book. There was really no discussion. It was a winner. And saying that, I mean, who's vetting it? Is your wife? Is she your main reader, before it gets published? Is she looking at these, or is it just you? And
my wife is, I've said before that a lot of people want to be a writer. Not a lot of people say they want to be married to a writer. So, writing in books and words is not really her thing. So
right.
she will read it when I'm done, but she trusts me. And it's a lot of trust to think, those essays that deal with the personal details of our life, that I'm going to be fair and honest. And my kids think I exaggerate everything, which I probably do, because, you use a little bit of focus to make a point. But, and I've been criticized with my first book that I wasn't personal enough in the book, about that I was just like this guy who was holed up in his office and he had a wife and kids, and why weren't they in the book doing things? And I think their thought was, you're sort of self-absorbed, which is certainly true as a writer for me. But my response would be, they didn't ask to be in my book. They're in the book, but I don't feel like I have the right to plumb the depths of their lives and try to ascertain things. I'm not a novelist, and I respect the privacy and boundaries that they have and we have in our own life. So I haven't done that. Now I'm forgetting what your question was exactly, but.
Well, who reads your work?
Who reads my work? Well, my biggest fan was my mom, and my mom passed in March 21st. And
I'm sorry.
After a long and really healthy life, and she died at my brother's house, who lives down the road. And we had hospice in there caring for her. It was the best that the circumstances could be. So, she's the one who, when I was going to heating and air conditioning classes at community college, which is my big first sort of academic venture, right, when I was 23, because I hadn't planned to go to college, said, I think you ought to do something with that writing, she said. I mean, this is just based on a few pieces she saw that I did in like English 110, where you're asked to write about your vacation or something like that. Most people hate doing it. And so I think I would always have her read things, because she also worked in a library her whole life. She read thousands of books. She had a good eye for picking up things that were inaccurate. As I got farther in my career, I would give her stuff and take her input, but it was less and less important. Although, as a son, your mom's approval is always important. I hate to say that, but if she really liked things, and there's essays in the new book that she didn't like, and she'd be clear about that too. But I knew they had to be in there, but she was mainly it. And I guess that's one thing. Maybe it's living in Southwest Michigan, in a place where there's not many writers per capita, right? And there's not really a writers group. I don't really have that. I've just had to sort of learn to follow my own ear and compare myself to what I see in writing. And ultimately, an editor's going to see it. But I was edited at work quite a bit. I had a really good editor in my organizational life, so that helped me with a lot of the structure and basic, accuracy of writing. But my own stuff, I was kind of on my own. And if I could sell it and make it work, I guess I did. And I let the writers be the judge, let the readers be the judge.
But what's the hardest part of the experience? Like, what do you think is? I mean, is it the editing process? Is it just finding ideas?
The hardest part is hitting the send button when you finally have the manuscript done and it has to go out, right? Because that's the hardest
and it's
part.
It's actually finished when you think it might be finished, right?
Yeah. The hardest part is knowing when to stop, and you really have to stop. It might get better, but if you keep this up, you're never going to get a book published.
Okay.
And I was encouraged, because even E.B. White, who's another big influence on mine, his essays. E.B. White is a writer. He was living at this farm up in Maine, and he would mail his pieces home to the New Yorker. He would go into town, he would put it in the mailbox. It was always this little procedure. Then he would drive home, and the postmaster knew not to mail that thing yet, because E.B. White would be driving back and asking for his piece back so he could do some more rewrites on it. Something would strike him on the drive back, and you can't always do that with email. But so that's the thing. Nothing is ever really done, but nothing will ever get published.
Right.
if you don't get it out there. So I think that's the hardest part, is really trusting that this is going to work and that the readers will have to pick it up from there and finally be the judge.
Well, what was that thing that finally prompted you to write a book? I mean, obviously, it took a while, but like, what made you finally decide, like, yep, this is going to be published? I'm actually going to go out and write a book, not do what I'm doing for the foundation or Notre Dame, but I'm actually going to publish a book. What finally, pushed you into that?
Well, with my first book, I was working on a master's in environmental journalism at Michigan State, and Howard Boston, who was my advisor, really told me that you should think about, you should put these essays together. You could sell these things, and and a friend of mine who got a book rejected by Mary Irwin at University of Michigan Press, he said, Mary didn't want to read she said she didn't want to publish my manuscript, but she said she really likes people who write about the natural world and essays and that sort of thing. Kathleen Stocking at the time, she wrote Letters from the Leelanau, which is a really popular book.
Oh, sure.
And so, you found that, and I didn't realize how important that was, that having an editor really appreciate your work. Pretty basic fact, but I sent her the manuscript, and oddly enough, I ended up taking about a 3-month leave from work because I was really exhausted, burnt out, and had anxiety and headaches and all this stuff, and didn't check my email for 3 months. And I remember finally getting back to my email, and there was an email from her that's saying, "Oh, we're really interested. Why don't you send it along?" I'm like, holy cow. This is for 3 months that I got with her. She says, "Yeah, I just figured that writers are kind of flaky sometimes. Maybe you decided you didn't want to publish after all." Like, no. So the big prompt there for me at the time was that I was 45, and that really seemed old at the time. I should get this book out there. And maybe the second prompt on this one is that I was turning 60, and that, had I just wrote all these essays for nothing? And frankly, it was hard because my book was rejected by University of Michigan Press and about 5 or 6 other university presses. And I began to feel like the guy who has a broccoli on his teeth, right? Is there something wrong with this? Is this really bad? And I will say it made me go back and really work at it to make it better.
Right.
And when you send in a manuscript, you send your best essays. And I was told that these books weren't sell, I think, but I didn't believe that to be true. I knew a lot of people that asked me to write a second book, so I thought it was worth pursuing. Once you get so far on something, you don't like to see all that go to waste, right? I mean, here's this collection.
Let me just ask. So, Star in the Sycamore was rejected by 5 or 6 universities?
Yeah, it was. Think of about every 6 of the Big 10 university presses, right? That could reject it, and I just don't think, looking at their work, they weren't publishing this type of thing anymore.
Okay.
And I understand that publishing takes different direction. But
Sure.
The argument that it didn't sell, it was in its 4th printing at University of Michigan Press. And, they're not big printings, but, university presses, to their credit, will push academic books. They have a pretty narrow audience that are important. And I felt this book, even though it was a popular book, it wasn't an academic title, I think it had merit. But, you get new editors in, and they have different interests. I think that's part of it. And I understand that. But I just couldn't get any, I just couldn't get any traction on it. And frankly, that hurt, man. I thought, okay, I published this one book. It was a Michigan notable book. I thought it was an entree to the next one, but it really taught me that there's no guarantees in publishing.
Okay.
I think for John Grisham maybe, but for guys like me, low on the list, it's like baseball, I guess. It's what you're doing today that counts.
Sure. So let me ask you, I mean, like, what's the significance of the title, Star in the Sycamore? What is the significance of it?
Well, the title came from my daily walks down the road, which can either be like a Via Dolorosa, where I'm sort of contemplating on what went wrong in the day, or it can be sort of like the word I'm looking for is labyrinth,
Right.
But I won't go down that route. Well, anyway, the road that I walk every day, you go down there long enough, you pay attention to trees, and you start to really study them closely. I even have names for a few trees, which I don't want to get into because that's really even more weird. But there was this beautiful sycamore that I would pass, and it had both of its arms are sort of raised up, almost like this touchdown Jesus position, if you're a fan of Notre Dame or not.
Right.
And these two arms raised up, and it's such a beautiful tree. And sycamore branches have this wonderful knobby, almost human look to them, like elbows. And I was walking that one late night, and I saw, because of the way the tree is oriented, I was looking south. I could see the dog star. Sirius was sort of in its crown, right? It was like all these were sort of wearing. It was a winter night, so there wasn't any leaves in the trees. And it sounds really poetic, but I saw the connection between the tree and the star, because in the winter it's a great time to look at trees because they're really bare of all their leaves. You can see their form and their shape. And this tree, I realized, had grown, in immediate reaction to the light that it received from the sun, from our star. And so there is a connection. Every tree that ever grew on the earth grows in relation to the light that it received from the sun. It turns toward the light or away from the light. There's certainly a spiritual metaphor there to people too. We're formed, I think, when we turn toward the light of goodness and love and health and holiness in our lives. And when we turn away from it, we can become shriveled and misshapen, and we don't reach our potential. So here was this tree, and here was a star that was settled in it. And I could see the connection between that and the universe. And going down the road, you see the trees, you see it really well displayed, because even on a dark night, trees stand in black relief against the sky, which is kind of great. And you can see how they've grown and twisted, because to a tree, light is everything, right? I mean, they get nutrients certainly from the earth, but to see that form and shape, and it was embodied in that tree, in that star in the sycamore. And I thought that was sort of represented what the connection that I wanted to make between the very local and immediate and the universal.
Nice. Really, I mean, that's a lovely description. Let me ask you this. Your first book was criticized for not being personal. Did you try to make up for that in The Star and the Sycamore, or did you try to just continue with what you were doing with Looking for Acorns?
I didn't, because, again, I'm not principally writing about my family. I'm writing about my experiences in my community. My family are part of that. In the degree that I can, I have an essay. One of my favorites in the book is when I took my daughter out to a local public access, where we took our canoe and we turned it upside down. Have you ever done that? And you come up underneath it. Yep. You can really hear the sound outside and see the water. It's like being in a glass bottom boat. Right. So I write with them in that respect, right? Or I write about the fact I'm going to, that we're baking bread. I write about the fact that I make them do this roadside cleanup where they pick up all these wine bottles and have the dregs of this cheapo wine in it, things like that, which I think there are activities we had to get together, but I'm not really getting into personal business. So I like keeping it that level. But I think the one thing I did try to do different on this book was because I've been exposed a lot more to scientists who are doing leading work around climate change or restoration, was try to write more about how we can care for the natural world in a way that can make a difference in our life and improve the places around us. And without, as you say earlier, not trying to overburden people with science, because I'm not a scientist anyway. But I was more interested in having a point of view toward, restoring the earth and keeping it healthy than maybe in the first one.
Nice. Very nice. So let me ask you, what is your favorite piece in this book? Which one do you think stands out above all the rest?
Well, there's two pieces that are really meaningful. And I would say the first one is it's from The War to the Woods, and it's about an experience that I had on an airplane coming back from a business trip, and I met this young man, and he was 173rd Airborne. He was coming back from Afghanistan on a 2-week leave, and this is like, you talk about culture shock. He was still in his uniform. You can still see he had this red clay on his boots and his fatigues and neck sunburn. He had been up in the Hindu Kush on this outpost, right, where they were, still taking incoming fire from the Taliban. And then you get this 2-week leave, right? And all of a sudden you get in a helicopter, you go back to your base, you get in a plane, and he was coming back. I think his family lived up around Baldwin. And I sat next to him, and I had this weird experience in the morning where it sounds really stupid, but it's true. I used to be in the National Guard, and I have this shaving kit with this little mirror in it, which I don't use anymore. I just carry it around, and it has the logo of the 173rd Airborne on it, and and I just that morning, like, why am I still carrying this thing around? I mean, this is ridiculous. I'm in this hotel, a nice big bathroom, and You know,
Right.
work sends me to good places and good accommodations. This is kind of goofy, right? I was rooting around looking for some Advil. I got kind of a hangover, actually. Get up early in the morning on a flight. And so I get to the airport in Atlanta. I was leaving Albuquerque, and I'm walking toward my terminal, and I start walking beside this guy, and I look up, and he has a unit patch of 173rd Airborne on. I said, wow, that's really interesting. And so we were walking along farther, you know, Atlanta's a huge airport.
Sure.
We get closer, and all of a sudden he turns off my gate and said, wow, he's on the same flight I am. He's on the gate. And then we're standing in line to get our seat assignments. I get in the airplane. This is an airplane like 170 people in it. The guy's sitting next to me. Okay, so here's the guy sitting next to me. So to me, it was beyond coincidence, right? That I'm sitting next to this guy, and I feel there's some reason. And I start talking to him, and he's discussing the war, and his combat, and his voice is sort of the staccato voice, and he's using this military terms. You could tell he's still kind of just revved up,
right?
You know? And I asked him what he's going to do. And he's going to go home, and it's very emotional for me. He said he's going to go out in the woods. He's going to go hunting, and but he said bow hunt. He says, you know, I really don't want to be around a gun right now, you know. And it was so cool to feel that timbre in his voice change. We started talking about hunting and fishing, and it was like that's what he needed right then, right? He didn't need to talk about war. He needed to talk about Michigan.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool.
And it was just this little window in time, this aperture opened up on the universe, and we had this conversation. And he calmed down. You could hear him calming down. We get off the plane in Grand Rapids, and I see his family there. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to like follow the guy around, but it was just this moment in time that I just, for whatever reason, I felt like that was what I needed to do.
Okay. Very nice.
When you're ready, can achieve that, because I couldn't plan that million years, you know.
Yeah.
But,
no, that's amazing. So, I mean, is that how you get the feeling to write an essay? I mean, you know, you have these moments where you're just like, yep, this has to be captured. And I mean,
you know, there are things I deeply care about. It doesn't usually happen about that. I mean, as a writer, if you didn't write about that, you'd have to be crazy, right? Because this guy fell out of the sky. I was placed beside him. We had this great conversation. I don't know what difference it made in his life. It mellowed him out enough, at least so you could meet his family, you know.
Right.
But so that's one of my favorites, you know. And I would say that another one, another big favorite is at the end. It's called "The Appeal of a Well-Simmered Life," and it's about my mother-in-law and a story she told me that I hadn't heard, and I'd known her for about 25 years at that point. You know, she was raised in down around the New River, down around Blacksburg, up the mountains.
Okay.
You know, they didn't have a horse or anything until, you know, they got water from a well. I mean, it's very much an Appalachian life. And she moved here in the early 60s with her husband, and her husband's brother has an orchard, and she has worked there and been a school custodian, done different things. And she makes apple butter, you know, and all these different things that she cans, like asparagus. And I wanted to be over there to see how she did it, because I really liked her apple butter. And so I went over there to work with her day after Thanksgiving. And of course, if you don't get there like at 5:30, you're not going to do anything. And by the time I was there, she was done working pretty much. She peels apples by hand just in a blur. It's amazing. And she started telling me the story as she was working. And it's the kind of story that you probably hear when people are working together, doing something with their hands, and they're just kind of chatting back and forth. Mm-hmm. And it came up that, you know, she was talking about her home, about the time when she was 6 years old. And this is a big family in Appalachian. She was babysitting her little brother. Okay. And they lived in a house down by the railroad tracks where the trains would come with the coal coming out of the Blue Ridge. You know, these trains would come by loaded with coal. And somehow her brother had sort of crawled out of the railroad tracks. And this train comes along. And I mean, really, a kid in the railroad tracks, a train full of coal, you know, screeches on its brakes. It stops just enough to hit this kid in the head and crack its skull, you know. And they're up in the mountains. You can't get a doctor easily. They called this woman who's a midwife and sort of a natural healer to come with this child and sit for, you know, a couple of days while they're all praying outside. It's an amazing story, right?
Right.
And the child survived, just his brother. I know him now. And it's like a steel plate in his head. But was just so powerful. I mean, it just bubbled up, and it just bubbled up just like the apple sauce and apple butter did. It just came up, and I didn't know that.
Wow.
You know, and to see her tell it now, and to see her still feel bad because she wasn't doing her job as a good sister, you know, at 6 years old. It's just amazing the power of stories to just reach out like that across the decades, and to be able to tell that was really an honor on my part. And I don't know if her family knew that well, right? It just sort of came out, right? And you got to watch what you tell to a writer, even if it's your son-in-law. But I think it honored her. You know, it honors her life and her character. So
sure. So let me ask you, do you have a third book in you? Do you think a third book is coming?
You know, man, if it has if the last one had the gestation period of a 17-year cicada, just about. So, I mean, I've got to get at it a little bit. I don't think I can write a third book of the kind that I've written right now, because, you know, the idea of so much about it was growing up and learning more about my sense of place and about the place where I live. I feel like I'm about to tap that out. So my third book will be a little different, and I'm not sure what that's going to be yet. And I don't want to force it. Obviously, you're not forcing anything if it takes you, 15 years to put out a book. But I won't do one unless I can do it right. So I've got to find that. I've got to find a new sort of structure or a new sort of thing to write about that I haven't already written to death, I guess.
Very nice. So let me ask you this. What did it mean to be a Michigan Notable Book Author? I mean, when you heard that?
Well, I think this time it meant even more than it did the first time around.
Really?
Because the first time around, it all seemed easy. You know, I sent the manuscript to one publisher, University of Michigan Press. Within a couple of weeks, I'd got a favorable reply. They wanted to publish it. Okay, they wanted to publish it. And then, as part of that, because the university does a good job of promoting their books, the book, is able to have the visibility to be named a Michigan Notable Book. I hadn't, frankly, heard of the program before that. I was gratified and humbled and all these things to be so recognized. But the second book, because it had been so long, and for a couple of reasons, I got so many rejections on it. And secondly, because I did something I thought I would never do. I mean, this book is through Mission Point Press, which does high quality work, but at the end of the day, it is still you're still self-publishing through them. That is the model. And it was hard on my writer ego to say, okay, this book has been rejected by 6 or 7 presses, and now I'm going to go out and self-publish, which, used to be the kiss of death, right? And because the field of self-publishing, and deservedly so to an extent, there's books that are not of the quality otherwise get published. It doesn't mean they don't deserve to be out there. If you have a story to tell, by all means do it.
Right.
But going the self-publishing route was hard for me because it was a bit of an admission to the fact, look, I can't get the conventional presses to bite on this. But at the same time, the publishing world has changed immensely, as you know, since 2010. So mid-range writers like me, there just aren't the presses that are out there to service a lot of good writing. And so I think looking at the ability of Mission Point Press to really still have a good editorial process, still do a great job with the design, that was really important. But, and it's a big but having Michigan Notable Book, having Library of Michigan name the Star and Sycamore Michigan Notable Book, that was a huge imprimatur for me. That was a stamp of approval that I felt I needed, both personally and to go market the book, to say, look, okay, I got this through a different route. I got this through self-publishing, but
right.
This field of esteemed book reviewers was able to see the merit of my work and to say that it deserved to be called Michigan Notable Books. That means everything. So it means a lot more to me this time around than it did the first. And I greatly appreciate it because it's important. And I think the publishing world has changed, and I think you should recognize good work in whatever form it comes out.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you, Tom. And we really enjoyed your book. And just to let everyone know, we're talking to Tom Springer, the author of The Star and the Sycamore, winner of Michigan Notable Book Award 2021. And Tom, thank you for being here today with us, and thank you for talking with us.
That's a wonderful opportunity. I appreciate it, Tim.
Oh, and thank
it's been great.
you. And everyone, just look forward to other videos. They will be coming out shortly. We'll be talking to many of the award winners this year. And with that, Tom, thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day now.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.